What's up, everyone? Welcome back. And today I have a special guest, Abby, and she has a channel which she covers all these topics that we talk about on this channel, talking about manifestation. And I really like her insights and her viewpoints because she really brings a practical side and a more well-rounded approach to these ideas, which I love. And she has a lot of experience in terms of physical accomplishments. She was a two-time NCAA All-American, part of the 2008 World Championship team in shot put. And so I'm excited to have this conversation with her today so that we can kind of unravel some of these topics and shed some light. So, Abby, thank you very much for being here.
I'm very excited to be here. Talk about it all. Practical application.
Yes, absolutely. So, with that being said, I know that was one of like your main kinds of ways that you kind of got into this work, doing the inner work, was accomplishing those things, accomplishing that, ability, that type of level of athleticism. If you would care to share kind of how that began for you, maybe how you kind of got involved with the inner work and how that kind of manifested as it pertained to your accomplishments and your, improving in that skill.
Yeah. So, the one thing I want to point out, because before I learned about all this stuff, I would look at people with success stories and I'd be like, oh, I wish I could do that. And it just seems so like they had it all. Like they didn't have the setbacks. And I want to do like behind the scenes of like, yes, I was really good when I was little. I was also much bigger than people when I was younger. And then I just kind of stayed the same size. But I had some very big peaks and crashes in terms of like, I had a lot of success in high school and then I sucked. I got worse each year in college. So psychologically, it just felt like the harder I tried, which I think this can apply to anybody, whatever you're trying to change in your life, the harder I tried, the worse it got. And it just made me feel even less powerless and like I had lost it. And so I want to point that out, that it wasn't like rainbows and butterflies and I just did this thing and it was picture perfect. It was really messy. I quit the track team. I gave back my scholarship. So with that said, what started to change it was really listening to kind of a spark inside, like feeling like I know that there's something more for me. So that was kind of the first thing. Like I just feel, and I think anybody watching this video has that too, because if they didn't feel like, oh, I think it's possible, they wouldn't be watching the video. They would have given up and just say, screw it. Right. So what started to change was my own belief, me starting to take action before I even knew what in the world was going on. And I started to find people who were there when I needed them, even before, like I still sucked. Like basically I was worse in my sophomore year of college than I was in my senior year of high school. That's embarrassing. So then I meet some people. I happen to live I went to school in a very, very small town, and Olympic gold medalists lived there in the same event that I was in. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I started to go, even though I was shy and I felt like embarrassed and I felt awkward. He was very supportive. He recommended the book Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. So I had already done a couple things to like solidify some yes and no's for me. But then he kind of gave me some clues. And when I started reading that book, it really started to help me because I was a choker, right? Where I would get into a big meet and rather than excelling, I would contract because I would sabotage myself. So Maxwell Maltz's book basically gave me some, tangible application of things I could do to start breaking that old fearful pattern. I just remember one thing specifically was stop, right? In his book, he talks about that. Like you start hearing that, like literally say stop. And that auditory, I think, intake also helps to block up that, impulsive thoughts. But
Yeah.
slowly it started to build more and more and more because I started to change the way I treated myself, the way I could take action, because I actually had now some grip. Like, okay, it's starting to go, nope. And I could kind of get myself back on track. So over and over and over, I believed more and more and more, just like a growing fire. And yeah, I was two-time NCAA All-American, and then ultimately came from behind to make the indoor world championship team, which was amazing. But I wasn't quite finished. And actually, I think that little bit of self-doubt, because even in that experience, I was still seeking self-validation in what I did so that people would love me and then I could have what I needed, which is
Hmm.
ultimately the next phase, which we can keep talking about, is what really started to get my power back. So I dislocated my shoulder and then I broke my foot 1 week before the Olympic trials. So I personally think that was like, the sabotage, because internally I still didn't believe I was worth that achievement,
Hmm.
which was a heartbreaking thing, but also a blessing to like not still be caught up in the external validation.
Yeah. Yeah. Really interesting. So when you were like reading psychocybernetics and you were getting more of a control and over that internal dialogue and all this, was he also providing like some sort of mentorship for you, the Olympic champion that you met?
I mean, yes, he did. I think for me, what was the most important thing was what not what he told me technically. It was that this person believed in me. So it
Hmm.
like gave me this space that, hey, because I felt so bad about myself. Like, oh my God, imagine like 3 years of trying your hardest, you're getting the worst results that you did before you even were trying. So him giving that um, work, or just not attention, but enthusiasm, he really was supportive. And so that to me was the most important thing, for him to recommend a book that gave me these, it's kind of like if I'm a rock climber, or like an ice climber, it gave me kind of picks. Before I was just kind of
Hmm.
clawing at ice, slipping, but now I had some picks to like utilize that energy and that passion into actual practical change.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's like kind of an overlooked thing. Like, just I don't think it's overlooked in mainstream advice, and especially in terms of athletics. Obviously, like to have a coach or to have a mentor or to have somebody who's like crossed that path before. But I feel like in the community, like the manifesting community, it's kind of overlooked because people are just like, imagine yourself having the end outcome in the first person. But one thing that is very helpful is to see what that looks like. And so even being around somebody that had accomplished this thing that you wanted, I think that that probably opened up your reality a bit, into saying, hey, look. And then having that, I know that that's been helpful in my life too, when somebody that you look up to, somebody that's accomplished something, and somebody that you feel inspired by actually believes in you. It can be a massively helpful thing on like a practical level. um just out of curiosity, did he like show you anything? You mentioned he didn't do too much of that, but like, was there an element of that, or it was purely all just like you studying the book?
Like, again, like looking back in that situation, it was not the technical changes that he gave me that gave me my success. It was, I think, also too, like I was so ashamed. Again, I think this can apply to a lot of people. You're trying and then there's like an element of embarrassment, like
Yeah.
I've been trying all this time and like I can't even do it, and like kind of wanting to do this, which is understandable. But when you're like, when you listen to that voice, it's like, I feel like it could happen,
Yeah.
even if it's just 1%,
Yeah.
and taking a little effort. And like, would you rather ignore your dreams and self reject, or kind of go through this embarrassment, discomfort really,
Hmm.
and go for it? And that action allowed me to have this exposure to somebody where they've been at the biggest stage in the world and they don't think I'm trash, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, wait a second, okay, maybe it's not so wrong. And people can have that in such a variety of different ways. And ultimately, your biggest power is when you do it for yourself,
Hmm.
So he helped me, yes, but he really was mirroring something in me that was already
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I'm all eternally grateful to him for his help and his mentorship, just to believe in me. It was more of like he nourished me and like helped keep me afloat. It's like the water was here, and he kind of was like, "Hey, you can swim." And it's like, I can, and I'm
Hmm.
like, "Oh, I can." That was the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, there's this book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and in the book, obviously using tennis for the kind of example for this, but this applies to not only sports but to anything. Where he talks about how there's like a self one and a self two, and self one is kind of like the more that ego based self, or it's the self that ends up trying too hard, right? It's like he talks about in the book, like using tennis, but you could use shot put also. It's like your muscles are strained. Like say you're gripping the
Mm.
racket too
Yeah,
hard or
you're
whatever. Like,
tight.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it happens. And
your
you
fear.
can
You're
and you can visibly see it happen in some of these matches and some of these like competitive sports at the highest level too. Like somebody will miss a shot and they get super in their head, and ultimately. I've talked about this in a couple videos that I've posted, but like if you look at somebody in the world of tennis like Novak Djokovic, one of the strongest things about him, and he talks about how he uses visualization and he uses these things, but it's his mindset, because he can do something,
Mm,
he can fumble a ball or he can miss and be down on the match and come back because he has that inner equilibrium. Like he doesn't get too put off course. Whereas a lot of people, even in professional sports at the highest level, they will, become emotionally dysregulated because they're
mm,
not doing well or they're not playing well or whatever. Like you said,
yeah.
choking, and that can happen in anything, right? We're using the example of
Yeah.
sports right now, but it's like when the stakes are high, you end up flip flopping. I use this kind of visual aid a lot of the time, but like this polarity of like getting so excited, right? If you're doing well, and then it's like as soon as you're making mistakes, you're getting like, oh, like all this negative self talk, right? And kind of like having that more like stable, regulated inner dialogue, but also inner feeling state. That's that sense of self that's
Yeah.
stable, that's confident. I want this, like I want to win this match, but I don't need it because my entire sense of self isn't based off of whether I win
Yeah.
or lose this match, right? And so again, that applies to everything, but I like that. And so this is a cool kind of way to segue into like the SP stuff. Um, I know that, mentioning like obviously for a lot of people, this kind of issue is one of the more challenging things that people deal with. Some people have more difficulties in other areas, but it seemed, and especially like online, you see all these people that are like, oh, my SP, like I need my SP to do this or to be this
Yeah.
way or whatever. And I think there's definitely some kinds of like, can be potentially some unhealthy dynamics that play out with that. And so, yeah, I think that if you like go ahead and like share kind of how this segued into that realm of your life, I think that would be helpful for people as well.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, in what you were saying just before, when you're neutral, or my spiritual mentor says basically like God or source or universe is in neutral, right? Neutrality. But if, you're kind of like, I forget, there's a phrase, but it's like, when athletes or people chase that outside and then it's happening, they're living the time of their life. But since their inner state depends on the outside to prove it or to be the source of its existence, if that's removed, then it's the best of times, the worst of times.
Mm-hmm.
So when you move it inside to realize it's simply an expression of the internal, that's where your power really, oh, that's not going, what's going on with me? And again, this is where it gets tricky, because there's this notion that if somebody treats you terribly, then you're doing something. And this is where I like to bring in a little more science, a little bit more logical, because it's not that person that you're making them treat you that way. You've got to look at your actual pattern, your energetics. If you come from parents who are really, really busy and they worked a lot, maybe because they loved you and they're trying to provide, but they weren't there. So what do you, no, they're not there for me. I have to chase them in order to have the connection I need. I can't stay and be myself. Oh, I said that. I shouldn't say that. What do they need? All of your attention is with them. So that is self-abandonment. No one is with you. So you're going to get a reflection of who you're being to yourself, somebody who's emotionally not available. A lot of the people, I mean, myself included, early on, where I'm like, okay, if I have that person, then I'll be okay. That's mirroring your childhood dynamic, where you don't have say in anything. You are so dependent on your environment to provide what you need, that you have to fit in to that primary environment so you can get your needs met. So if that is, you not saying what you really mean, if it's withholding, if it's you being the first place person, the top student, you have to be that in order for them to love you. So then you take that primary template and you then find this person who potentially is a little out of reach. This doesn't apply to every single person. And one thing I'll say now is, when people would say like anything about my relationships early on, I was like a little hyena. I'd be like, like, don't you say anything. You're trying to take what I want away from me. And I saw it as like this attack on, oh, you're saying I can't have what I need. Screw you. I know what I'm doing. I didn't. But it's what I'm saying now is to help people to actually get what they want in the ways, because there's a thing that has to shift. You have to understand your own self-abandonment so you can start to be there emotionally for yourself, and that shifts the dynamics of how people treat you and also what you find attractive. Because you chasing the person that's
Yeah.
unavailable, you'll keep chasing them eternally because you need this distance to when we're adults, we're trying to resolve past patterns. We find other people and situations, and when we respond differently to that outside stimulus, that's when we are the new person and we complete that healing. So
Yeah.
when we start to understand that the internal thing, we're not causing them, that person in 2024, to treat you bad or be neglectful or just be not good to you or not interested. You're not causing them to do it, but you are participating in self abandonment and self neglect because you feel that you have to be who they want you to be so then you can have what you need. And that's where you lose your power.
I know I love everything that you just said, and I feel like it's so it's so multifaceted, it's so layered that I think that a lot of the times, even what you said just now, or things that people will say, it's like it slips through the cracks because there's different levels of understanding of this stuff. And
Mm.
one thing that's like, I guess, to me, just spitballing off of what you're talking about, it's like, yeah, there's different, I think that for people who are at different levels of the journey, it is very helpful to be hyper aware of the other person. Let's say, like for a romantic situation or any sort of thing, right? Because you want to know what's going on with how you're making them feel. But if you already have like basic kinds of like social skills, I guess is one way of saying it, or you already are at a place where you can have genuine conversations with people and kind of just connect with people in an authentic way, then it is important to bring part of that attention back on yourself as well, to say, look, how is this person making me feel? Because it's not all about this
Mm-hmm.
person, right? It's not all about me just
Exactly.
like making this person feel like they're attracted to me or whatever. It's also like your ability to discern what's going on, like with how who actually is this person? Is this somebody that I actually want to be around anyway?
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
it's very very interesting, and I think like yeah, like what you're saying here, the self abandonment is what happens with a lot of people, and it's such an interesting
Yeah.
dynamic because you notice that even when somebody like likes you, let's say that you meet somebody and they're like extremely receptive. They're giving you all these indicators of interest, and it's very clear that there's like a level of interest there. And you start texting, and then they text you. Let's say that they text you, but then you text them, and then you don't get a text back from them. Now all of a sudden you're back in this dynamic where even though they were the ones at first, now you're like, oh, kind of craving
What
that
did I
thing.
do wrong?
Yeah,
What's wrong with me?
exactly. And
Yeah.
again, it's coming from that place of like that insecurity. I mean, in a lot of cases, and it's just there's so many ways of looking at it that obviously you want to be good at communication and you want to like put your best foot forward and communicate in a way that is allowing your personality to come through, but also in a way where you're being especially in the early stages of dating, you want to keep things like fun, lighthearted. You don't want to get too, um, I guess I should say, like you don't want your tone to be too serious or anything like that. I mean, there's just so much that goes into it, but I think that a lot of the what you're talking about will come naturally when you have this inner kind of like your inner cup is filled. You're already having a good time,
Mm-hmm.
and you're simply coming from the frame of I want to give this good feeling that I have, this the value that's inner generated, that's like I'm in tune with this God source energy, and I want to offer some of that to this person, right? And I would like it if they like it, but I don't need them to like it, right? And that's the difference. And
Mm.
I can
Yeah.
I can feel it when I'm in that state of I'm having a good time, whether I'm out or whether I'm whatever. And it's like, yeah, like my life is good, no matter what. And I'm here just purely sharing this with somebody. And a lot of the time, like you said, it gets reflected back immediately. Like the it's almost like the people now, when you're coming from this frame of giving rather than taking, they they can feel it. Like it's an inner shift, and it can be very subtle. Because I don't know, it's just so hard to describe. I don't know if you have anything to add on to this, or if this makes you think of anything. But like, I know for me, it's a inner tweak that seems, it can kind of feel very small, but it like makes all the difference.
Yeah. I mean, I really like how you said the consideration, because that's what I'll say a lot with my one-on-one clients, like being a master of self-consideration, which, especially if you grew up in a religious home, this idea that you're considering yourself, you're selfish. But then the notion of selfless, then you're nothing, right? You're hollow. Then you're going to get a reflection of that. People are going to treat you that. They're not going to get any reflection of anything. Um, and I totally agree with you too. When you are good with you, and those listening who are like, oh my God, like I give, or like, no, if I don't do this, I'm not good with myself. The trick is the parts of you that are screaming that if you see somebody who likes you, you run after them, or hyperfixated. I'm talking about myself here. Like in the past, I'd be like, if I got like the slightest indication, I would be like, oh my gosh. And I would just become hyper fixated on this person. Maybe this is the person. Maybe this is the person. My attention went to them. Really, now that I see, what I needed is to understand that part of me that was desperately seeking, that part of me needed something, rather than going, oh, hang on a second. What is this reminding me of? And my friend just the other day said something so beautifully, where I was having this hard time and processing some stuff. And, she's like, okay, don't make it about the outside, bring it to the inside. Do these tears echo something from your history? Is there a history in the tear? Just like, yeah, there is. Oh, this reminds me of when I was a little kid. This
Mm-hmm.
this desperate search. Maybe it was a parent, and maybe they do really love you. They tried hard, but they were not giving you what you needed. So you think, I have to desperately seek after the people. No one's coming to me. That's a faulty reasoning from an experience that did happen. But like, how to go about getting your needs met was captured when you didn't have a fully developed brain. So when you get like, so romantic situations, sometimes friendships too, but really intimate, and I'm not talking about sex, intimate situations is going to push up the old wounds. That's why you might be great at business, you might be great at friends, but when it comes to romance, oh, it's pushing up these wounds. That's beautiful. It's helping you see these implicit memories, which don't even take your conscious awareness to store, but it's helping you see where you're not settled, right? You said insecure, right? Parts of you that are not secure. If you're not secure and you're seeking after somebody to meet that security, you're basically building your house on sand. If they leave, you're shattered. And I do want to draw out a picture. If you watch my channel, I love to draw my little stick figures. But to me, this is
Yeah.
what really started to change my life. As a little kid, here you are, having a good time. Let me edit this a little bit over here. So here's your caregiver, right? Your needs are over here. So if this person isn't attuning to you, right, which is what adults have responsibilities, right? They are there physically, emotionally, all of it, like they to caretake you. But sometimes it's only physical. It can go a lot of different ways. But you're meant to have this, right? How do you feel? What's going on? You're having these big emotions. Let me help you through it. Let me teach you how to be a human in all capacities. Most often we don't get this. That doesn't make them bad people. That makes the environment too small for you, and it didn't have what you needed, period, right? So anxiously attached people, or people who chase, we learned, oh, to get connection, we have to leave ourselves and we have to go to them. And that gets fixated. Now, I also do want to point out that there's another side too, because the people who chase always get this negative rap of like, oh, you're so needy. You have a need and you think it's in the other person. Understanding and attuning to yourself is how you break this, right? There's another side of the equation where people are not interested, right? Like the experience you said where you're interacting and all of a sudden they ghost. All of a sudden they were good and then now they're distant. There's another wound that happens where this person, right, they had their boundary crossed too forward, right? They crossed it that way. This person's boundary was somebody went too far away. That is a boundary violation. It would cross their sense of safety. This person, right, this is more avoidant or fearful avoidant, they had their boundary crossed too close. So physical abuse, mental abuse, hypercritical parent, sexual abuse, all of that. So for them to stay safe, it's completely opposite. They need space, they need distance. Too close, I got to get away from you, right? So it's opposite sides of the coin in terms of wounds. So we have opposite ways to stay safe, but both of those are actually self-abandoning. When you start to chase that your sense of safety is in him or him, her, whatever, boom, you're abandoning what you need. That part of you is chasing because you actually have a need. You understanding and meeting the need and learning how to ask for it from people who are available changes everything. This person's also self-abandoning. They want to connect, but they fear connection. It's not in their best interest, but it's an outdated way to stay safe. That's where a lot of these SP dynamics pop up, in my opinion.
And that is interesting too, because yeah, depending on your past history, you could fall into those different categories. And I think another important thing to take note of too is like when you are, putting yourself out there in the dating world, wherever it might be, going about it in this way that is, we talk about like you talk about being detached. That's one way of looking at it, and another way is like when you truly do feel good about who you are and what you bring to the table. Let's say even in a very, very practical sense, you're like, yeah, like I know who I am. I know all the good things about myself. I know what I have to offer. Or however it makes sense to you, but you know that you're contributing value. You know that you would be a good option for this person that you are potentially, engaged with. It really does come from this place too, where there's by knowing that that kind of automatically gets rid of that neediness or that needy energy, and you come at it from this place where it just feels good for the other person. And even if you want to compare it to like marketing and sales or something, it's like that pushy salesman versus like the person that just has a really big YouTube audience, or the person that just they say build a beautiful garden and the people will come or whatever, right? It's kind of like that. Like you do what you're doing, you're living in an authentic way. You day to day are authentic and aligned, and that's why this manifestation stuff, it like really is about being just like that highest version of yourself, in tune with that divine energy. Because when it's showing up in your day to day work, when you're truly living in that aligned fashion, it kind of just permeates out from you, and then it is attractive to people, and people can sense that this person is like for real. They're the real deal. They're not putting on airs. They're not putting on an act or whatever. But yeah, that's why there's just, like I said, this is such a complicated topic that when people seek like this one solution or one fix all thing by affirming for my SP or whatever, there's really not, like, in my opinion, that's not really.
And see all that affirming, conform, all your energies over here.
Yeah.
In terms of needs, that was something that when somebody first asked me, my spiritual mentor, like, what are your needs? I had no idea. So in hindsight, I kept looking for people not even understanding or thinking of, do they have what I need? Do they have what I want? I only thought, will they like me? And, in hindsight, there was a lot of people I dated, no disrespect to them. They're wonderful people, but I actually didn't like them. They're fine and we could hang out and have a good time. But in terms of like a long-term partner, they did not meet my needs. But since I didn't consider that and I skipped like go and like went around the thing, I'm like, okay, who can I be? What can I do to get them to like me? Totally abandoned, ghosted, neglected my needs and went straight to that. How can I get them to like me? And I think that's where a lot of people skip over, and even considering learning discernment. What do I need? Right. And for me, it's consistency, reliability. Those are huge ones. And when I don't have them, it makes me feel a little anxious. My triggers, my old stuff might come online, understanding how to navigate that, but also learning how to advocate for my needs. And if that person's not showing up, you're back in this, chasing them. So they're bypassing you and you're like, who can I be for you? No one's with you. And you're going to get a reflection of that lack of emotional commitment and availability.
Yeah. And that goes back into like that breaking the habit of being yourself, like Joe Dispenza talks about, because it's like if you're used to experiencing that flip-flopping emotionality, and then you just recreate that pattern. Whereas really, like you
Yeah.
said, what you want is consistency. What you want is somebody that you know is genuine. And really, like a good relationship, I mean, it's not going to, the person is not going to be making you feel insecure all the time. It's not
Mm.
a sign of a relationship that you want. And I don't know. Yeah, the ability to practice that discernment. One thing that I've been able to do lately, we were mentioning this off camera, is that like I tend to rest in my very like logical kind of masculine type of mental bandwidth where I'm looking at things very like logically and all this. And so sometimes I can be caught up with the goal, and in terms of like an SP thing, or let's say whatever, it's like okay, getting from point A to point B, like having going out on this date or going whatever, and I'm and then I have a tendency because I am like in that way, I think in that way, to in the past not practice that discernment that we're talking about, which is like the feminine energy. I would say is like the yin energy, which is that receptivity. Well, what is the read that I'm getting on this person? Is this a person that I actually, like you said, is going to be uh enhancing to my life, or are they going to be
Mm.
somebody that's probably honestly going to be detracting from my life, right?
Mm.
And even in the sense of a casual relationship, there's different levels to how much maybe standards that you want to have for somebody. But in the context of a long-term relationship, like I've been able to, I mean, I don't know. I guess like getting like too, I don't want to get super personal, but even just like in the recent past, I've been able to pick up a lot more nuance about people's character, about like what's going on with them internally, based off
Yeah.
of like the way that they're showing up in interactions. And it's been very, very like a very cool experience because I feel like what I've been experiencing lately is probably similar to what a lot of women experience when they're out and about, and they are very receptive. Women tend to be more in tune with their emotions than men do, and they're probably running into these guys that are too pushy or acting really try hard or just
Mm.
whatever it is, and it's a turn off, right? We know that women, women could be talking to a guy for a couple minutes and they're really into him at first, but then he says something or does something, and all of a sudden it's like a complete shift in the dynamic. Well, because they're tuning into these subtle things, and a lot of the times, like men, as logical, using myself as an example, but I think a lot of men tend to be like this. We're not quite as emotionally in tuned. We tend not to be. So I
Mm.
think that's something very, very practical that we and like I said, I'm speaking from my perspective, but obviously, like this could apply to women as well. If as a woman you're watching this and you're very just zoned in on this guy because you've made up in your mind that he ticks like box A, box B, box C. Maybe that's physically, maybe that's like based off some other programming that you've had, but then he's making you feel super insecure all the time. I think it's a good point to kind of reevaluate and say, hey, is this somebody that I really want to be investing all this energy into? Like
Yeah.
somebody that's actively making me feel shitty, making me feel insecure all the time? And really just be honest with yourself, because a lot of the times, what I think is going on with a lot of these dynamics that you hear is people are playing out, like you said, these old childhood wounds, these old childhood
Yeah.
traumas where they're seeking validation from somebody who is, actively kind of playing these games. And it's, I don't know, it's really tricky, that especially the dating climate that we're in right now. But I
Mm.
think that being authentic is something that's lacking, and it's something that no matter what, man, woman, people are going to respond well to, because that sense of being genuine and authentic, in this era of social media and of like quick dopamine hits, it is very refreshing, and you can feel when somebody really is being authentic. So,
Yeah.
um, I know it's kind of like a lot and a little bit all over the place, but again, this topic is so big that there's not any sort of band-aid, like regardless of what any of these coaches say. And that's why it's like kind of a little bit frustrating sometimes when I hear people make these like dogmatic statements or comments about, oh, well, you're not doing this. Like the
Yeah.
law
So then
says
you're
this.
blaming, again, even this, in childhood, this is a great point too of what you said about like you said something earlier, but it's like you, for one, can avoid or, ignore red flags or even orange flags. Like, I noticed this. And we're human beings, right? People are not going to always be perfect. but it's about the collective observation. How is this person showing up, consistently showing up? Unavailable, wishy-washy? Is that how you know, like how your friend, if your friend told you about that behavior, what would you say to him? Start treating yourself like a friend, right? So like if you had something really important, would you just leave it on the table and walk around the room around strangers? No, you'd probably keep it close and say, hey, I'm not sure. I don't think you're a bad person, but I also know if I don't know if I can trust you yet. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And as you learn to trust, you can open up. But I think a lot of people go into potential relationships and they're like, okay, here's all my delicate part. Who can I be for you? And your vulnerability, you open yourself up before you actually learn if you can trust that person, because you're not really valuing the preciousness of yourself. So when you learn to value and befriend yourself and stand up for yourself and create boundaries, and people, I won't say earn it, but they're showing up as somebody you can trust. And as you trust, then you can get closer. But, you know, and I hear what you're saying. I think it's great points. I come from the frame, like, no matter what body you're in, we all have male and female energy, right? Mental is more of the mind, the masculine. And then receptivity is, you know, more divine, and then more feminine energy. But each of us have it. But now we might be skewed one way or the other, different cultural things, different family dynamics of who you can be, right? Oh, the woman just has to be, you know, take care of everything, be the victim, or the guy's the hero. You know, that can get so intermixed too. So I think it's about learning how to be both to yourself,
Yeah.
using the receptivity. Okay, what do I know? And using logic and reasoning to think through, because if we're overly emotional, that's that when we get triggered, we're in our limbic brain, we lose half of our IQ. So this is even like in the psychology world. They say, I've heard multiple people say this, that it's uncanny that if you were to walk into a room with, say, 100 people of potential suitors, male, whatever, you know, gender you prefer, whatever, you will like beeline, even on an energetic, unconscious level, to the person who perfectly matches your wound. So if you had an emotionally unavailable parent, or if you had a really hypercritical, overbearing parent, why are we attracted to that? Because it's familiar. It's comfortable. We know how to live in that world, but we also don't like that world. So it's actually going to be uncomfortable to step into a new interaction in terms of romantic relationships. I sought relationships with people who were emotionally unavailable. And one time I heard this person told me, and I was so mad. I wasn't mad. I was just like, oh, she was like, oh, well, you don't actually want a relationship. I was like, how dare you? I've been fighting for my life over here, trying to find somebody to be with me. And she's like, well, you keep finding emotionally unavailable people. You don't want to be seen. And I was like, oh, that's a hard pill to swallow. And she was right. I was insecure. I didn't have very high self-worth. I wasn't showing up for myself. I emotionally neglected myself. So I found people who were too busy with something else. So I would chase them and try to prove that I was, you know, I'd be their hero. Oh, you need like, oh, I'll change your tire. I'll do that. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you need me to give you, you know, it was just so self-abandoning, but they couldn't see me. So when somebody started showing up where they were seeing me, that was so scary. That was so uncomfortable. It wasn't painted in rainbows and butterflies, which there were beautiful moments when people do see you and you embrace and you can receive that energy. But in the meantime, if it doesn't feel safe, you will reject it. And this is interesting thing too that I want to bring up, to bring the logical mind on, is that it's two ways, right? Like, or one of the biggest ways is we energetically will pull in that old energy. And when we respond in a new way to the old stimulus, we step into our new world. That would be breaking the habit of being yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Awareness of, oh, they, you know, we agreed on this thing. They let me down. They canceled last minute. Okay, that, you know, I don't like that. Can I advocate for myself? Can I use my voice? As a kid, you couldn't, right? And
Mm-hmm.
maybe you say, hey, you know, I get it. Things happen, things change. In the future, I need you to let me know, or maybe just observe that this was important and that you're changing, rather than
Yeah.
just being a doormat and saying, oh, I guess I'm asking for too much. Now, the other interesting thing when it comes to recreating our old dynamics is going to be perceptions. Perceptions are insane. There's a book, Vital Lies and Simple Truths. And the whole book is about how your brain is structured, where all this information is coming into your subconscious. And just like little, you know, horse blinders, our brain will literally block out of our awareness, you know, senses, every sense, Hearing, you can't hear it, you can't see it, you can't touch it, because that conflicts with our image of ourselves. So for me,
Yep.
emotionally available people, they're right there. I'm like, oh, you come over here, you know, because that's going to feel comfortable. That's going to intact my identity. But our brain will avoid anxieties at the unconscious level. And so you really have to get awareness of your story, awareness of the feelings, awareness of your body sensations. If you start to feel tight, we talked about this with the sports thing. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel like I'm under threat. Okay, that should be a huge alarm here. Okay, what's going on? How can I bring everything into this moment? I don't have to respond, but I need to prolong the gap. There's a gap between the old decision, impulsively, unconsciously, and the new way. And elongating that gap, even in neuroplasticity, they talk about this, right? The pause, whatever you want to call it. I call it minding the gap. And it's the fork in the road. Okay, I'm really starting to tell myself the story that they didn't text me back. I must have done something wrong. I must not be good enough. Maybe they found somebody else. All of that is self-rejection. I'm the reason they're doing that. No. Okay, what do I need right now? What did I need as a kid? I need consistency. I need some emotional support. Okay, maybe I'm going to do a physical movement, a somatic movement to help my body calm down. Walking, which is such a low level, it's like non-sexy. You're like, go for a walk. And the reason you do it is because there's some nerve, I forget the name of it, in your eye that unconsciously you're not aware of. It scans when we're walking so we don't fall. It's looking for danger. It pulls from the same source of energy the amygdala uses. So your amygdala is like, oh, hey, remember back in 1982 that feels like it's right now? That's dangerous. Yeah. So you're reducing your ability for your amygdala to scan by walking. So you're going to just feel more regulated. And again, when you're in your limbic brain, your survival brain, you lose half your IQ. So do you really feel good enough about your IQ that you can solve and break out of a problem from half of what you're capable of? No, that's going to be a hard mountain to climb. So those are kind of practical applications of starting to get aware. Okay, my body is starting to feel tight. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to breathe to stay in my body. Another thing, you can have texture. If you have texture on your clothes, you're trying to stay in the moment and get aware of what's going on. And then maybe you need to excuse yourself. Maybe you go on a walk. Maybe you journal. Maybe you color. Maybe you meditate. That's, in my opinion, how you practically apply these theoretical things into your practical life so you can start breaking out of the old impulsive unconscious pattern and start living who you want to be.
Yeah, there's like so much here in this. So first off, there's one thing that kind of a realization that actually yesterday when I was talking to somebody, which is also the ability to differentiate, because we have, when we talk about feelings, that's why like the English language, in all honesty, we need more words, I think, in the language. But basically, there's a differentiation between, so when you have an intuition about something, you have that gut instinct. That's kind of what you're talking about. Like, this person's making me feel tense. This person's making me feel a little bit not right, right?
And then I do want to pause, because this is where it gets tricky. They could be a reproduction or the archetype of the past. That could be them. They could be a no-go. Or you could just be projecting that old archetype onto them. So that's where it gets really tricky. But I wanted to say that before you go.
It does get really tricky. And that's what I was going to mention, is that, okay, so yeah, that's also, that's even makes it even more complicated. So thank you.
But it's possible. It is possible.
Yeah. But so we have this intuitive thing. And I think that, I guess, so this is what this is the differentiation, right? We know that as human beings, we seek homeostasis, we seek comfort. So what feels good in the moment might be sitting on the couch, watching Netflix, stuffing our face, right? And we use the word feel to describe this, right? Oh, does this feel good? Oh yeah, eating this, like stuffing my face full of French fries feels good. Maybe even chasing after this emotionally unavailable person, like you mentioned, feels good. But really what it is it's feels comfortable. It feels familiar. And really what that is the ego, which seeks comfort in that like it seeks the familiar, sneaking in and acting like it's those gut intuitions, because it's not. Like what it doesn't feel comfortable to go work out, to go on that mile run, to go lift weights, to go do the inner work, right? It doesn't feel, I don't feel like doing that in the moment. maybe I don't feel like doing the work to actually seek out a healthy relationship because I want to do what feels easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Comfortable.
there's a differentiation between that gut intuition, which you should pay attention to, and just because something feels more natural or more easy in the moment doesn't mean it's right. It might feel good to like sleep in till 4 p.m., but
Mm.
that's not the right decision oftentimes. And so it's a very interesting differentiation because, for me, again, coming from this more, and you're absolutely right that we both have this masculine energy, feminine energy within
Mm.
us. But because I tend to rest more in that masculine side, the logical side, I've kind of had this kind of ideas of like, yeah, like fuck my feelings type thing,
Mm.
which on one hand, when I think about it from that perspective of, oh yeah, like if I don't want to do this because it's uncomfortable, that's actually been very helpful and useful in my life. Part of the
Yeah.
transition for me maturing was doing the hard thing, doing the thing even though it didn't feel good. But
Yeah.
one thing that I've learned is not to shut off that intuition, that gut intuition, which is that feminine receptivity. Because when we have both active, then we're able to
Yeah.
practice this discernment that we're talking about and being able
Yeah.
to differentiate because it's very, very sneaky how that ego sneaks in and acts like it's your intuition when it's not.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I wanted to, and that could be like, you could liken that to being akin to what you're talking about with, um, you know, what you just mentioned. I forget how you phrased that, but that is one point that I definitely wanted to address
Yeah.
because, yeah,
Like you being the new you. So it's like, here's the you think you are. And this is another thing too. I'm actually going to make a video in just a bit about, but like, I was like, I don't want to break the habit of myself. That's self-betrayal. No, it's the you think you have to be in order to be accepted, in order to get your needs met. But it's a false you. It's a you that had to be when you were a little kid. And whatever way that looked, it can be totally different. And sometimes the dynamics can look a little different currently. But this right here, this box, that's your comfort zone. So yeah, your amygdala is going to look at something and say, no, you're not going to go speak on stage. What if they make fun of you? What if you fail? That's no, 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 no. We know we can survive if you sit on the couch and say, I'll do it next year. I'll do it in 6 months. I'll do it when I get the approval outside. And then that's my permission, right? But all it's doing is keeping you inside the box. Well, the box is just going to recreate everything you've already experienced. It's the comfort. So there will be fear when you have this new opportunity. So even if you can just start to say, like people watching, okay, I'm starting to feel really uncomfortable. What am I afraid of? What bad thing do I think can happen? So you want to, this is also very interesting. A lot of what dictates our life, Carl Jung, one of my favorite quotes by him is, and now I just went blank, but I'm going to paraphrase it. It's like, until you make conscious the unconscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. So until you're aware, till you're clear on what you're unaware of what happened in the past, it's actually making choices for you. So 8-year-old little me, 6-year-old little me is saying, no, no, Abby, we can't do that. Remember, we have to be a good girl. If we're not a good girl, then we don't get our needs met. But it's so skewed because that part of me doesn't have a full functioning brain. So if you can start to get curious, oh, okay, I'm afraid that I'll fail. Okay, well, what if I fail, but I learned something? Okay, well, that's actually different. Okay, well, do I trust myself enough that I can fail forward and I'll have what I need when I need it? Those kind of things. And yesterday I was doing some breath work in like this class, and I kind of, you're doing this work and then your body, and then you like get kind of these insights, and it's like, oh, okay. So fear, you can't, Einstein's quote, you can't solve a problem from the same or with the same level of mind that it was created in, that whatever I'm paraphrasing, but you get it. So if it got created in a fearful state and I'm still fearful, I'm just going to stay in the box. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is taking action in the face of fear. What is that fear? What is that danger? No, you can't use your voice. You can't say how you really feel. They're going to reject you. Oh, okay. Whose opinion of me is more important? Is it them or is it me? When you override that your opinion, your approval of yourself is more important than anybody else outside of you, that's when you take ownership of your self-image. If that's not the case, if you're fearing maybe mom and dad or your spouse or your friends look down on you, you're saying that their opinion of you is more important than your own. So they and your anticipated your anticipation of their judgments, their expectations, or their opinions is what is directing your life. And it's like, you can do whatever you want, right? It's all up to you, but at least be conscious of the decisions you're actually making and what they really mean. So you can get clear, and making it, an implicit memory is stored in our body without our conscious awareness. You don't have to go back to the memory to remember it. You just have to be aware of what is popping up as kind of like, no, you can't do that because, okay, because what? Pull it out of your body so you can reason on it with your adult mind, and you'll probably start to have a perspective shift. Because in my opinion, change is not created by time. We know this because people, unfortunately pass away before they ever make any change, and they're hoping and waiting for something outside of them to come in. Time does not create change. A shift of perspective is what creates sustainable, lasting change. When you shift how you see yourself, when you shift the stories and meanings as to why something happened, why somebody treated you some way, especially as a kid, we take blame because our parents are kind of gods. We need them to be competent in order for our survival. So if we start to say, you know what, as an adult, I see, hey, you could have done, I didn't deserve that. Of course, that wasn't my fault. I was a freaking 4-year-old kid. Like, that's pretty ridiculous. You don't have to villainize your parent, but you're just trying to call a spade and stand up for yourself and give yourself a voice that you couldn't at the time. That creates incredible change.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And one thing we had talked about before is like that tapping into like being able to feel safe in the face of creating those changes and showing up differently, because I think that's one reason that people really have a tough time doing this, right? It
Yeah.
feels safer for them to obsess over the SP. It feels safer for them to, chase, because that's what they're used to, right?
Yeah.
And one thing we had talked about is that, yeah, that ability to regulate your nervous system, there's all kinds of different things you can do, getting into that meditative state and really just, it kind of goes full circle. That's like what Neville Goddard talks about, is like feeling the state of the wish fulfilled, but like not in the sense where it's like, I have to get this outer person, specific person, to conform in this exact way. It's like, I have to feel good about myself. I have to feel good about who I am. I have to be in this place where I value myself. I value myself enough to also practice the discernment to say, hey, look, this person might not be
Exactly
worthy of me, worth my time, because that's what people end up doing. I feel like in this community is they shy away from, because we're in the physical world, we're also in the spiritual world, but we are not divorced from this physical world. You have to embody it on this if you want the physical manifestation of it. And so being able to face reality as well. So it's like you go in and do the work, you feel that, and you give the best of yourself that you have to offer. And if that person doesn't receive it, it's not up to you to make them conform in this exact specific way. Sometimes, people will go throughout their whole life and they'll have family members or this or that. And, sometimes people don't, sometimes people won't conform. Sometimes people won't change. We're co-creating reality. I firmly believe that. I think that's what science proves. And so it's not that you are the sole arbiter of every single behavior of every single person around you. That's just not. And I think to delude ourselves into that is where we really run into problems, and people run into problems in this community. And so, like you mentioned, valuing yourself, putting yourself first, that is, ironically, paradoxically, it will get some people to conform. People will start to, and what's really ironic as well is, like you mentioned, about why we get attracted to like unemotionally available people. Well, part of that is because even though there may be something toxic going on with those dynamics, that's for sure. Like in a lot of those people that are just like playing mind games or whatever, narcissism and all these things. Well, part of the reason is because they don't have any of that neediness. The people that are emotionally unavailable are in a place where oftentimes, and maybe it's overly ego based, and maybe it's because they're doing it in a way which is not authentic, or in a way which is not where they are showing up and being genuine. But one reason that is attractive in a lot of cases is because they're not you talk about the different types of attachment styles, but let's say that you're talking with somebody and you get the sense that they don't, because a lot of the time those people, they don't need anything from you. They may it may be coming from the avoidant place, like you said, where they're fearful of that. But just you wanting to tap into that validation and get their validation, or get their, sense of whatever it was that we were lacking in childhood, that is because they're not freely giving of it. And it's kind of paradoxical, because you don't want to lean too far into that. Like I said, it can create an unhealthy thing where if all you care about is yourself, and you couldn't care less about other people. But putting yourself first is an attractive thing. Being somebody who really is just like living life in a way where you're not seeking from the outside, because when you seek from the outside, that again puts you into that you're now at the effect, you're not at the cause. So really, I don't know, really interesting, just like so many layers. Like I said, it's so nuanced. But all of these things that we're talking about, if you're able to regulate yourself internally, slip into this state of no mind, as Joe Dispenza talks about, slip into this state where you are able to feel fulfilled from within, feeling of the wish fulfilled, whatever you want to call it, you're going to show up in a way where that needing from the external is no longer there. And that's when the external begins to reflect back the
It's like the truth of yourself.
already fulfilledness that you feel, and then you will have more reasons to feel fulfilled by it. That's one way of saying it.
And like Neville said, like he didn't say, oh, go do these things or do revision or that. Like he's very clear, like to change your circumstances, change your consciousness. Like, and the reason that is, I think, is because you have a new lens of how to see and what you can see in reality. Like if you value yourself, if you start to learn to appreciate and understand, like, okay, if I'm this is something I tell with my one-on-one clients. I'm like, do you look like, if you have an animal, right, a dog or a cat, do you say, okay, what are you going to do to earn this fruit or this attention, this love? Nothing. Them existing is the proof that they're deserving, they're worthy. Look at a tree, look at flowers. Well, I don't know. Last year they didn't produce any fruit. I don't know if we should give them anything. It's like, no, you want to nourish them because they are an expression of God, the universe, whatever it is that you believe. So can you start understanding you are simply part of that, right? Worthy and deserving, and shifting your awareness of yourself, raising your consciousness starts to change what is being reflected. The circumstances, the reflection, right? He also said, don't look in the mirror, change what's being reflected over and over and over. It starts inside. And one thing I wanted to say is, how do you do it, right? How do you start from like feeling not good about yourself? Well, making like small commitments to yourself, showing up. Like, can you say, okay, I'm going to drink more water every day. I'm going to go on a 3-minute walk. Like, what are ways that you can have an agreement and meet the agreement? That is starting to build trust. You're starting to learn that you can trust yourself. You're showing up consistently for yourself. Because if you can't do that for you, and you're going to get a reflection of you, you're just going to endlessly find more people who aren't showing up. So it's like, okay, well, how can I do this? And it builds, it gets easier, right? And even the word confidence, the etymology of the word confidence, which I think we could all agree that is a good starting place for any venture, right? Well, I just need confidence, right? I need a higher self-esteem. The etymology of the word confident is full of trust. That's it. Go look it up, like straight to it. It's like, okay, so to be confident, I'm confident because I've built trust with myself. Well, how could I start doing that and put the bar real low, right? And the better you feel, especially physical movement, more water, like really giving yourself more attention, starting to learn to live in your body. Most people don't. I'm learning how to. Doing somatic movements, doing breath work, anything. YouTube is full of so many different things. Stretching. And we're not saying, oh, let's get fit. Let's look at our body and try to get other people's approval. We're doing this so we can move energy, that stuck, stagnant energy. So you start to feel better. When you start to feel better, you might be like, you know what? I'll try that. Oh, you know what? I'm starting to feel good. I have a little space for discomfort because I trust myself. I'm going to be okay and I can take care of myself. So it all builds, and it's all going to be situational of what you're in, but starting to just take care of yourself and consider self. I can't tell you how much better you'll feel and how your values will change of not needing it so badly in somebody else, because you'll endlessly get the opposite. You'll get the reflection of who you're being to yourself, which is unfortunately self-abandoning and neglecting, not
Yeah.
understanding where your real power is and the real cause to the effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I've been doing these like meditations lately, and I actually need to like get more back with them like more consistently. Because when I do them, I mentioned this in a video recently. Like there are these guided meditations that I've been using by this guy Joe Gallenberger, and he used to work at he does work at the Monroe Institute. Um, and they kind of like allow you to kind of gently get into that alpha brainwave state, like the
Mm-hmm.
state akin to sleep, whatever. And then I've been working on being more receptive in that state as well and allowing things to come to me, which I've been improving. And
Yeah.
when we get into that state, we're then able to see more. It's almost like more is revealed to us, and
Yeah.
so that's been happening for me lately, and it's been really really awesome to see. Um,
Yeah, like the clues you're looking for aren't outside, they're actually inside, and they might lead
exactly.
you to an outside clue that gives you more awareness. And yeah, there's so much more that you can be doing when you learn to show up for yourself. And you know, even going back to the needs, like what did you need from your adults, right? Maybe as emotional attunement, as support. The more you start to do that, like consistency, nurturing for you, right? Like giving yourself that space to feel safe, like whatever it is, but the more you can get into what it is and start to show up for yourself that way, the more space I believe like you'll have to get those breadcrumbs, to get those clues, to get those, I never thought about that. What if I tried this? And then you're like on these different little micro paths that start to veer further and further away from that old automatic impulsive behavior. And yeah, you might have a redo, the forgiveness, the acceptance, the you know, you being your biggest fan, I think is also very important. And your own permission and approval and validation is what I think we're all looking for in other people. And it's like, whoopsie, my bad. I thought it was them. It's actually me. You know, that's
Mhm.
how I can be. I'm like, whoops, didn't know that. Whoop, okay, let me just update this. As opposed to, how could I have done this? What's wrong with me? You probably
Exactly.
learn that judgment. And also, too, here's an interesting thing that I read in a book, Conquer Your Critical Inner Voice. Our internal judgers are not ourselves. They're actually our parents early on. So when you
Mhm.
have this really critical inner judge, like you can start to like, does that sound like somebody I knew growing up? Is that what they would say? And you can start to say, thank you, love you. No, I'm good here. I'm good. I don't need that. That completely changed my inner talk. Just realizing awareness, breathing, and then, no, thank you. I'm good. What is my voice? What is my opinion? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, another thing that's been happening, I feel like when it's almost like my bandwidth of what I'm ever able to perceive by going into these states, like I'm talking about, is expanding. And one thing that, you know, in a lot of these esoteric teachings and mystical teachings they talk about is that, you know, this God source, it obviously it exists in everything, right? And so it's like I've kind of been having this this visual lately of like this divine energy is like coming down, coursing through me, right? But it's
Yeah.
also flowing through into other people, and we are all basically like external manifestations of this same
Yeah.
source. And so when you get into that state, I know it sounds kind of strange, but you really do then see that really this person is also me. Like this is a reflection of me, and so you're able to then see how this energy, this divine energy, which we all come from, is showing up in this person and their distorted lens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we all have these distorted lenses, maybe through our not maybe, but we definitely do through our like past hurts, past experiences. But when we tune into this energy, that's what clears up the lens. That's what
Mm-hmm.
expands the bandwidth of our perception, and then we actually know, okay, well, this person, you're seeing more of the person. You're able to perceive more of who they are in their inner essence. And then at that point, you're able to know, well, okay, it's like almost this intuitive just knowing that okay, this is what this person, even if that's what your goal is, right? That you want to date with this person or you want to build a relationship with somebody, you intuitively then know you have this inner knowing because you're able to see more of who they are, of what it is that they need or what it is that they, you know. And so even if you come at it from that perspective of like, oh, I really want this one person, again, tuning into this will open up your perception, be able to get this better, bigger read on people and be able to see, yeah, first off, the discernment, is this somebody that I even want to be with to begin with? And then, okay, well, this is how I can show up and maybe accent in this way, because we all have different ways that we show up depending on what different people that
Sure.
we engage with. And so it's like, okay, now I can, show up in this way. And, that's what actually is going to fulfill this person's need. And I don't know, it's just so interesting. I feel like there's just so much that could be said, obviously, about this topic. And maybe some of the stuff that I'm talking about right now is just getting too esoteric. But I think that it really is when you're able to step into that place, then you just the language that you begin to see things or just kind of like know things rather than having to hyper be in the hyper vigilant state or hyper analyze or things like that. And it's more of just this energetic thing, and it's like this flow that just, and it's hard to describe. So I'm doing my best to describe it, but yeah.
Yeah. And then I really do believe we're all kind of leading, Ram Dass, we're all leading each other home, and like we all do need each other. So anybody watching that feels like other people have it and they don't, like there's a unique flair, a unique flavor to them as their soul that we need, we're rooting for them to come into the truth of themselves, to evolve and expand and come into their highest light, because the world, we all need it. Everyone is equally as important. So, knowing that and not giving power to other people, they're doing it, I'm not. Comparison is also, I wanted to say this one last thing before I forget. So anytime you start to feel anxiety, oh no, did this person like me? Did I do something wrong? Okay, we're starting to get into self-abandonment. I'm starting to compare myself to other people, self-abandonment. Starting to get really suspicious. What do they want? Do they really mean that? Starting to really distrust. Yes, there could be some things where people are showing up and that those are relevant, but start to get very aware of those are huge indications. When I learned, I'm starting feeling anxious. Okay, I'm starting to abandon myself here. That really helped me break out of the story. So I forgot to mention that earlier. So that's a big one.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, we could talk about this here for like hours.
I know this could be like a 6 hour combo.
We could talk about it for probably days, but I think that basically a lot of the stuff we covered, is just showing up and really kind of like bridging the gap from making this stuff theoretical to being practical in a lot of ways. We covered a lot of different things, but obviously like that regulating yourself, getting more in tune with yourself, becoming aware of these, like you said, like what is it that makes you feel hopeless, makes you feel stuck, awareness of that story, making a new choice, becoming aware of what those perceptual biases are then, and then learning to feel safe as you push that comfort zone, as you start showing up as that new version of yourself, and kind of like being that, giving yourself that your permission, giving yourself that what you felt like you needed or whatever from an authority figure. And obviously like it can help to get that, like you did with, that guy that you mentioned at the beginning of this whole talk. But really, like at the end of the day, we're the ones that give it to ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that's what it's about. And that, the self-abandonment, self-rejection, when we stop that, we then have a new perspective of people that treat us in ways where that doesn't feel good. Right. And we begin to move naturally away from the people that don't. So with that being said, great discussion. Would love to hear what you guys have to say in the comments down below. If this, I think that a lot of people in this SP community, I've mentioned this multiple times, but getting too carried away with this, I need this thing to conform exactly this way. That is what I think Abby's talking about with that self-abandonment and the self-rejection, because it's not showing up in a way that's like honoring yourself.
And then you'll get the reflection. You'll be disappointed that you think you're not good enough. And then it just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating, when really it's learning to break the habit of self-abandonment, understanding what that looks like in the practical world, starting to physically, mentally take a new step, and understanding that is the step to true connection. And the attachment to the SP is, if I get them, then I'll have this connection. But really the connection comes from you doing it to yourself. And that opens the door to finding the people in the world. And maybe it could be that person, but you don't know until you start going internally, going in this new way. Are they going to come? Oh, okay. That's a good thing. That's a blessing. If that doesn't work out, then you'll actually find what you're looking for. It might show up differently, right? The universe has an amazing ability to show up in ways better than expected. And then sometimes lessons come a little bit more worse than we could have predicted. But in the end, it can open up our heart for more light and more awareness and more growth and deeper opportunities for ourselves in this physical body.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, for everybody watching this, I'm going to leave Abby's links down below in the description so you guys can go check out her channel and all of her stuff. And with that being said, much love as always. Drop this video with a like, hit me with a subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.
Take care.